You're listening to Don't IEP Alone with Special Education Advocate Lisa Lightner. For more information about Lisa, the IEP Toolkit, and more ways we can help you in your process, go to adayinourshoes.com. Now back to the show with your host, Lisa.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Don't IEP Alone. I'm Lisa Lightner, a special education advocate living near Philadelphia. So listen, we had, and by when I say we, I mean myself and several other advocates. We get together weekly. If you're an advocate and you want to join our mastermind group, email me at IEP@adayinourshoes.com. But we meet weekly on Thursdays and we bounce around all kinds of great ideas and brainstorm, troubleshoot issues, things like that. But last Thursday, we were having this discussion about how it is that for the most part, when you call an advocate, your child has had an IEP for some time and things aren't going well. And the things aren't going well portion might go on for weeks, months, and sometimes even years before a parent, learns that an advocate is an option and then finds an advocate and calls the advocate and all that. A lot of times an issue can really fester for a long time before you call an advocate. And we were saying how then we get involved and one of the first things we usually do is request more evaluations. And we end up kind of taking a step back. And how great would it be if advocates were involved from the get-go? But it just doesn't really work that way, usually. So I thought, that would make a great series on the podcast to thoroughly explain to parents, newbies, and seasoned vets what a thorough, comprehensive, robust IEP evaluation process should look like. When everything is done well and in best practice, what does it look like? Because when you have to go back and redo it, then many times, schools have 60 days to evaluate and 30 days to do this, and it can just go on forever and ever and ever. So even if, like I said, if you're a seasoned parent, your child is still getting reevaluations, should be, and you want to know better so you can do better going forward. So that's what we're going to talk about over the next several episodes is the IEP evaluation process. And we're going to talk about all of it from the very beginning to when you suspect an issue and what to do and how to do it, to reevals and what IDEA says, and on and on and on, including requesting an independent eval if necessary. I will try to remember, I have notes here as I'm talking. I will try to remember to explain all acronyms because the special ed world is drowning in acronyms and I speak in them myself, and I'll try not to. But let's start at the very beginning. IEPs, the whole foundation of an IEP is the evaluations. I believe I have another podcast episode on this. If not, I know I have a blog post on it about IEP present levels. And IEP present levels is the most important part of an IEP for the reason that it really is what drives the IEP. It's the IEP present levels that the team looks at and says, okay, these are the child's needs, let's develop goals. Then when you have goals, that's what drives supports and services, and then supports and services drives placement. So if you don't have a good present levels section of your IEP, the whole rest of your IEP is likely going to be garbage, and you have to go back to the beginning. Okay? And the beginning is evaluations. That is the main core content of what is in your child's IEP present levels, is the information from that evaluation report. Yes, you can have anecdotes in there and stories and observations and things like that, but it's the evaluation results that should be telling you what you need. A school district is bound to a legal obligation known as child find. And what child find essentially is that they're required to find and identify disabled children or children eligible for IEPs within their jurisdiction, wherever that might be, a school district, a county, whatever that is. So schools are obligated to locate and identify disabled children. However, in day-to-day practice, I find that most evaluations are parent-driven. It usually originates with the parent requesting evaluations. Now, a state or a state agency can refer a child for evaluations. The school district, anyone within the school district, a teacher, a principal, anyone can make that referral for evaluations, and so can a parent. They can request evaluations. But again, I find that most of it is parent-driven. It must be done in writing. I can't say this enough. Yes, stay on friendly terms with your teacher and absolutely engage them in conversations, because we are all people and we want to, have relationships. But you must do this in writing to start the clock. And parents say, well, when should I request evaluations? I would say as soon as you have any suspicions that your child might have a learning disability of some kind, make that written request. The reason is the school district has 60 days. So before we even get to this, 60 days, depending on the state, and it varies. It might be 5 days. It might be 10 days here and there. You make a written request. Then typically the school district has anywhere from 5 to 10 to 30 days to give you what is known as a permission to evaluate form, a PTE form. Some call it a PTR, for permission to reevaluate if it's not your child's first set of evaluations. So you make the written request via email or a letter. They have a number of days to get you that form. You then may sit on it for a week or two, right? Typically you have 10 days to send it back. So you send it back. Then they have 60 days to evaluate. They then have, if the child is found eligible, after that 60 days, the child is found eligible, they have 30 days to draw up an IEP. And then, of course, there's time to invite you to a meeting, and different states have different timelines on that, anywhere from 5 to 10 to 30 days. Basically, what I'm telling you is this. If you have suspicions today that your child has a learning disability and needs special education, even if you submit that written request today, it could be 100 days before you have an IEP in place. Throw in some holidays, summer breaks, spring break, you can see the IEP process by itself is inherently slow. It's just so slow because of these timelines. And I get it. Like, you can't necessarily do it in an evaluation. Like, could you do it in 30 days? Because some states say 30 days. Yeah, you can do it in 30 days. If they cut it back to 14, I don't know. Especially with the school staffing crises that we're having right now all across the country. So make that request as soon as possible. The other thing that you need to know about evaluations is this. Many times when a parent requests evaluations, the district will call you in for a meeting to discuss your request and discuss what everybody's seeing, in day to day in the classroom, at home, things like that. They may suggest to you that your child is put in what is called either RTI or MTSS. RTI stands for Response to Intervention. MTSS stands for multi-tiered systems of support. The U.S. Department of Ed is very clear that RTI or MTSS are not to be used in lieu of or to delay evaluations. You can do both. You can say, great, I think RTI is a great idea. Let's put him in that. I still am submitting a written request that he be evaluated for special education services. You do not have to try RTI first. You do not have to try MTSS first. You do not have to try a 504 plan first. IDEA does not say this anywhere, that you have to try any of these other things prior to being evaluated. So stick to your guns. Thank you. I don't want you to wait. The IEP process is slow, as you know, and I am submitting my written request for evaluations today. Let me know when I should expect that permission to evaluate form. That's just one sample of what you might say in an email. But it starts with written request for evaluations.
We'll be back after a quick break.
We interrupt this podcast to bring you a truth bomb. The IEP process never gets easier. You get better. If you do not learn the IEP process and how to use it to your advantage, your child will get left behind. That's exactly why I created the Don't IEP Alone series of advocacy courses for parents. Join us and gain the knowledge, skills, and support you need to navigate the complex world of special education and IEPs. Visit adayinourshoes.org for more information. Some of the other questions I get from parents are, well, what evaluations should I ask for? What tests, what assessments, what should I ask for? And here's my professional advice. First of all, the school district is required to evaluate in every area of suspected disability. So, if they do not suspect a disability in some area, you have to bring it to their attention. When you do your written request, it should be very thorough with examples of what you're seeing from your child, what your child is telling you, homework assignments, grades, attention, focus, social skills, listening, processing, working memory, whatever it is that you're seeing, you need to lay that all out for them. If your child has a medical diagnosis, and whether that's autism or ADHD or any of the above, anything, it's up to you how much you want to disclose. A medical diagnosis is not required for an IEP. Schools do not diagnose. Schools determine if a child is eligible. And that's an important distinction. Schools are not going to diagnose your child with autism. They're not going to diagnose, they're not ADHD, anything. So again, if you want to disclose and you can say, my child has been diagnosed with ADHD, I can provide you with a report if you wish. If they need or want to see proof of that, that's up to you. What's more important is that you want to list how the learning disability or suspected learning disability, how it is affecting your child and their education. What are you seeing day to day? If you're seeing a lack of fine motor skills and handwriting hasn't improved, or struggling to read, and what you're seeing, with reading and homework assignments and processing, following directions, any of those things, you want to point out specifics of what you're seeing. And again, they are required to evaluate in all areas of suspected disability. So make sure you point everything out. Your child may not have emotional regulation issues at school. Your child may be one that holds it until they get home and then lets it all out, right? And the dam bursts. You want to point that out and give, again, specific examples. You also should have your child participate, at every step of the process, but they should always be participating to the maximum extent possible. So in addition to you making notes on or telling them what your homework process looks like each night, and it might be 3 hours of tears and frustration and resistance, that you have to detail for them, you need to engage your child and ask them, what do you like about school? What don't you like about school? What's really hard for you? What do you find really easy for you to do? What do you enjoy doing? What are you most successful at? And things like that. Again, their participation is going to vary based on their age and ability, but you want to engage them to the maximum extent possible because they are going to be the most important person on the IEP team going forward. Okay, I want to recap this episode, and we're just at the very beginning. So to recap, pretty much anyone, state, local, parent, can request that a child be evaluated for special education services. As soon as a parent has any concerns about their child needing special education, you should make a comprehensive written request. It should include detailed examples of what you're seeing and how your child's unable to access and benefit from their education. You can agree to RTI or MTSS, but that should not be used as a reason to delay evaluations, and I would advise you against agreeing to that, because if they're agreeing to interventions, they're agreeing that, yeah, we're seeing something too, so get those evaluations done. The IEP process just on its own is very slow moving. So start to finish for an initial IEP, you're looking at 100 days or more. So that's why you want to submit that request as soon as you have concerns. And once your request is received by the school district, they should be in touch with a permission to evaluate form, which we're going to talk about in the next episode. If they are going to refuse to evaluate your child, they have to provide that to you on a form known as a prior written notice. I have a different episode on understanding prior written notice and how to use it, and I would advise you to go listen to that episode if that is what happens to you. Per IDEA, once your school agrees to do the evaluations and you've signed that permission to evaluate form, they have 60 days. Now, throughout this whole process, I'm going to reference IDEA a lot because that is, of course, the federal statute that established special education and what to expect. But it's also important to know that they leave a lot up to the states to do stuff and to implement special education and really do it how they see fit. A state can do more than what IDEA calls for. And when I say more, I mean more in favor of the student, but they cannot do less. So IDEA says evaluations have to be done in 60 days. Some states have lowered that to 30 days. Some have, I believe there's one state that says 45 days. They can do that because that is more beneficial for the student. A state cannot say, well, we take 90 days. They cannot do less than what IDEA calls for. Remember that you should not request specific assessments or steer them toward a specific disability. I would write an email that says, I am requesting that my child be evaluated for special education services. I believe he has learning disabilities that are interfering with his ability to access and benefit from his education. And then I would list them. It can just be a bullet point. And again, point out handwriting and point out social skills and reading and writing and processing and thinking and memory and whatever it is that you're seeing, focus and attention. But I would not steer them down a specific path, nor would I say, I am requesting that my child be evaluated for ADHD or evaluated for autism. If you wish to disclose that as part of your letter, you can do that. But I would not request a specific classification or eligibility categories is essentially what you're asking for. We're going to talk about eligibility categories down the road, but I would not request a specific one, because if they don't find your child eligible under that category, it's long and complicated, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds like I can sometimes when talking about IEPs. So just list what you're seeing. They're required to evaluate in every area of suspected disability. I would end your email with this. Please send a permission to evaluate form for me to sign, and I will return it so that I can return it to you promptly, or I will return it to you promptly, or something like that. Or I've even heard some advocates, no, so I don't agree to this because I don't want parents to agree to forms sight unseen. But I do know of some advocates who help their clients write these letters, and at the end they put, you may accept this email in lieu of a permission to evaluate form or something like that. Somehow like giving them like instant permission to begin the evaluations. Because what happens then is the permission to evaluate form takes a few days for them to get to you. You look at it, sign it, that takes a few days, and so on and so on. It could be another 2 weeks that you're delaying these evaluations, and some don't like to do that. I'll leave that up to you. You know your family and your situation best. But I would definitely put at the end of that letter that you are expecting to receive a permission to evaluate form. And then I wouldn't be surprised to be called into a meeting to discuss it. That's very common. It doesn't mean that they're going to say no or anything like that. If they do, they have to provide that to you on a PWN. So if they do refuse your request, whether it's in email, on the phone, or if they say, let's talk about it, and they bring you in and they say, we're not evaluating, they have to, I would let them know, okay, I will expect that response on a prior written notice form. Thank you. Because they are required to do that. Also keep in mind, if you go to this meeting, you request evaluations, they say, can you come in for a meeting? You go in for a meeting and you get a, let's just wait and see. Let's just try this. Let's just try that. How about if we do this and we meet again in 3 months? You've just been politely told no. If you want to accept that no, that's completely up to you. I'm not going to tell you how to parent your child. But you have just been politely told no. And if you just nod and say, oh, okay, and leave the meeting and agree to wait and see, you've just delayed your child's evaluations by however long you just agreed to. So just keep that in mind. It sounds nice at the time. It sounds productive. Maybe not every child needs to be evaluated. I've never met a parent who didn't have that gut feeling of there's something going on here, and there wasn't, if that makes any sense. So that is what it should look like when you request evaluations. Now, if your child already has an IEP and you have additional areas of concern, same thing. Just send a new email. Hey, since we last met, I've noticed new concerns popping up with my child's learning disabilities. She does A, B, and C, and now I'm noticing that she does X, Y, and Z. I would like to have an evaluation in this area. And it might be something like, a child is struggling to learn to read And so maybe those things were attributed to ADHD, which the child has, but maybe the child also is dyslexic, and it's not ADHD that's preventing the child from learning to read. It's actually dyslexia. So things like that. You can always submit another request. You don't have to wait the 2 or 3 years. You don't have to wait for an annual IEP meeting. You can request evaluations at any time. So do that if you have concerns. Again, the IEP process is slow, and every time that you wait, you're just delaying the process. All right, next episode, we're going to talk about that permission to evaluate form and so much more as we plod our way through IEP evaluations.
Thank you for listening to Don't IEP Alone with Special Education Advocate Lisa Lightner. We're so glad you've joined us and would love to connect with you outside of the show. For more information about Lisa, the IEP Toolkit, and more ways we can help you in your process, go to adayinourshoes.com. From self-care tips to common IEP mistakes, there's even more to explore. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast and subscribe to never miss an episode. Until next time, don't IEP alone, and you don't have to.